This is part 18 of A Wolf Amongst Lions by Kallypso. Don't forget to like this video if you enjoy, and subscribe for future stories. Please check the description for a full list of tags and the link to drop a kudos for the original author. With that out of the way, let's continue. Chapter 96, The Beginning of the End. On had felt helpless like this more than once. He recalled sitting in a boat, looking back at the shores of Hardhome, helpless to save any of the terrified wildlings as the Whites killed all those who could not make it to the ships. He recalled watching the Night King step through the masses of the dead and raise them all into his army, and all the while Jon could do nothing. He felt that same sense of powerlessness now, looking out at some 10,000 dead men, while tens of thousands more crossed the river and continued on south. To Harrenhal, to his younger siblings, his grip clenched on his sword. He could not sit here and leave them to die. Opening the gates could be disastrous, Barristan Selmy said. We have the numbers to beat them in the field perhaps, but not without massive casualties. We have a good deal of horses in the stables, Jorah Mormont pointed out. We could try to break through their ranks and lead them off. Scatter them perhaps, it would make it easier to pick them off. If need be I can burn you a path, Daenerys Targaryen said. They're not immune to fire. My dragons cannot kill 10,000 in one fell swoop, but I can at least keep them at bay. I worry about a trap, Robb said. The second you get onto your dragon, the undead beast could descend from above. The cloud cover is thick. He could be up there right now and we won't know. You're right, Jon turned to the others. But we need to draw the Night King out sooner or later. I don't like not knowing where he is. Neither do I, Daenerys said. I can fly low to give myself time to react. Either the Night King stays in hiding and I make a path, or he comes out of hiding, and we have a chance to end this once and for all, before the dead even reach Harrenhal. If we do manage to defeat this section of the army, it will be a hard ride south, Jorah speculated. The undead could set other traps for us. They've already been anticipating our moves. Our last few battalions of cavalry have not come south with any news. I fear they are lost. We must assume that, yes, Robb said, which means they might come back to kill us or our allies. There is another way that we can eliminate the dead, Jon said. A group of this size must have at least a few White Walkers with them. If in the fighting we can kill one or two, we improve our chances. If we're lucky, I'll catch one of them in Drogon's flames, Daenerys said. All right, from which tower do we make our play? The western tower, Robb said. Otherwise we'll have to cross the frozen river, and if we try to break through the Whites at the eastern tower, the Whites to the west will have plenty of time to set up a defense as we go south. We can use the siege weapons from this tower, Grey Worm said. If the 10,000 from here try to cross the river, we'll meet them with fire. Good, Daenerys said, resting a hand on Grey Worm's arm. Keep a small garrison here, my friend. Do what you can to keep any more Whites from following us south. Grey Worm nodded once. Yes, my queen. It's settled. We move most of the troops across the bridge, Robb said. Then when the majority of the undead army is out of sight, we deal with the stragglers and move south with all possible haste. Jon let out a shaky breath, gripping tight to his sword. There was no way they would get through this battle without casualties. The Night King had ensured that, but if they could not provide reinforcements to Harrenhal, the dead would almost surely overwhelm them. They would have to see what dragon fire was worth in this long night. Jon sat on a horse next to his brother, staring straight ahead at the gate to the twins. Over the past few hours they had shifted their troops to the western tower and gave every horse they had a soldier to ride them. Now they waited in the silence. Beside and behind him, horses shifted uncomfortably and men gripped their reins in trembling hands, trying to keep calm. Many of them were soldiers who had seen more than one battle. Some had never seen war at all. And all were prepared to lay down their lives. The waiting was the worst part. But if they attacked too soon, the Night King's army might turn back to attack them, wiping them all out in one fell swoop. They had to give the dead a chance to move south out of sight. Then they could deal with the 20,000 stragglers. At last the signal came from the walls. It was almost time. Slowly the front gate began to open, and an icy blast of wind cut through it, warning of the danger that lay beyond. As it rose, Jon could peer out into the darkness and see the blue eyes watching them, peering through the gate as it slowly creaked up. Then the gate stopped, and the world was once again silence. The living and the dead stayed absolutely still, staring each other down through the entrance to the twins, waiting to see who would make the first move. Then the blue eyes began to shift. They rippled through the darkness like a wave, and some of those tiny blue dots began to get larger. Their owners screeched and growled as they scrambled over the snowy landscape, eager to make use of the gap in the defences of the twins. Jon heard their teeth clacking and their horrid shrieks echoing from the night, coming closer, closer, closer. Then there was a roar. Daenerys Targaryen descended from above on her black dragon, cutting a line of fire through the whites and sending many of them scattering. As she cut down through their ranks, the green dragon Regal cut across, bathing the front lines in flame. It revealed a gap large enough to drive their cavalry through. "Charge!" Robb cried out. Their forces surged forward, charging the scattering whites, meaning to make use of the path Daenerys had carved. The warmth of the fire was welcome in the icy cold of the night, and it decimated every white caught in its path. But the gap created by her dragons was not permanent. As the flames died, the remaining whites surged back together to meet their charging forces head-on. Jon let out a roar and cut through 3 soldiers with a great sweep of Longclaw. Horses squealed but did not slow as they broke through their forces. They had the advantage this way. The dead did not have cavalry. Jon kept on cutting and slashing blindly at the enemy as they pressed forward further and further until they broke out the other side. "Go," he said, "go south, keep riding." The cavalry did exactly that with all haste. Some of the whites followed, but many others seemed confused. They had been ordered to stay at the twins after all, not to follow the living. It was possible that if they continued south, they could avoid many of the whites. Jon let out a breath of relief at the thought. It was only then that Jon had realized he lost Robb's voice at some point in the chaos. He wheeled his horse around, searching for his brother, but did not find him near. "He got ahead of you," he told himself. "He's fine." But he did not turn to go forward. He waited, cutting the heads from the few whites who got near him, hunting for his brother in the darkness. Robb. It was in his searching that his gaze caught upon another figure standing several paces away, pale and blue-eyed, with a sword of ice in his hand. A White Walker. Jon barred his teeth. "There you art." A horse broke from the ranks of the whites, charging at the White Walker. It took Jon only a moment to recognize his brother. The White Walker moved quickly, whipping around and slicing the front legs from the steed. Robb tumbled from the horse and hit the ground rolling. Jon could see blood streaming down one side of his face, though Jon could not tell where it came from. Robb struggled to his feet as the White Walker advanced on him and blocked its blade as it fell. Jon let out a hiss and urged his horse forward into a gallop. He cut through whites left and right, clearing a path as Robb lost his feet and fell to the ground. The White Walker raised his blade. A roar tore from Jon's throat as he threw himself from his horse, bringing down his sword on the White Walker's head. It shattered in the wake of the blade, and Jon hit the ground hard, gasping for breath. All around them, thousands of whites fell, and those that did not were quickly overwhelmed by the rallying soldiers. "Robb," Jon coughed, pushing himself to his feet. "Are you?" "I'm fine," Robb said hoarsely. There was a nasty cut across his eye which accounted for the blood streaming down his face. "One of the bastards got my eye." "Did he get any other part of you?" Jon asked, gripping his shoulder. "No," Robb said. "I can still ride and fight." "Once we stop the bleeding maybe," Jon said. "Come on." He grasped his brother's arm and helped him to stand and get onto the horse. Behind them, another line of fire cut through the army of the dead. And for a moment it illuminated the darkness in front of them, and the enemy charging toward them. This new wave came on horseback. Even from this distance, Jon could recognize the cavalry they had sent to their deaths. Northmen, Dothraki Southerners. The dead had decimated them and now sent them in to swamp the living. It was too many for Jon and Robb to fight on their own. "Ride," Jon muttered. "Ride as fast as you can, I'll hold them off." "Jon, get on the fucking horse now," Robb said, gripping his arm. Jon looked up at him, smiling. "Make sure you lead the troops to Harrenhal." Then he smacked the horse's rear as hard as he could and sent the beast into a gallop. He thought he heard his brother cry his name, but then it was lost in the darkness. Jon shifted his grip on his sword, slowly turning back to face the charge. His fingers tingled and his heart pulsed painfully in his chest. And yet, he felt calm. This was not the first time he had faced certain death. This would not be the first time he died. He raised his sword, breathing in deep, preparing for the final moments, preparing for the undead cavalry to run him down. But just then something slammed to the ground behind him, so hard that it seemed to shake the world. Jon lost his footing and fell back just in time to hear a dragon roar. A blaze of fire burst forth, lighting up the cavalry and driving them back with its force. The green dragon, Regal, had come to Jon's rescue. Slowly, Jon struggled to his feet, watching the great beast in amazement. He could not comprehend why the creature would come to his aid, even if it could sense his Targaryen blood inside of him. Many with Targaryen blood had been killed by dragons in the past, but this dragon... Jon noticed its eyes then. They were strange, almost rolled back in its head. Jon had seen such eyes before when his brother slipped into the skin of other beasts or back in time. "Follow the green dragon." "Bran," Jon whispered. Even this far apart, his younger brother was watching out for him. The green dragon let loose great tongues of flame upon the cavalry, absolutely decimating them until all of their corpses had crumbled to the ground. If any of the horsemen had survived, it had been because they scattered. The dragon shook its great head, looking to Jon, staring right into his eyes. He shifted his wing and lowered his shoulder just slightly to the ground. "Follow the green dragon." Gods above, Jon thought. I hope Daenerys Targaryen cannot see me in this darkness. Then he swallowed his fear and hurried to the creature's side, crawling up onto his back. He grabbed hold of whatever he could, trying not to lose his stomach as the dragon shifted beneath him and launched into the air. He was flying. The world rushed beneath him, a sea of fire and ice, and the cold air nearly choked him when he breathed in. But Jon was flying on the back of a dragon just like in all of the songs. He could not describe the rush he felt in that moment, almost enough to completely erase the fear of the Night King and his vast army. He would have to thank Bran for giving him this small joy later. For now he tightened his grip as the dragon dove closer to their retreating army, clearing out a few scattered wights with flame as they made their way south as quickly as they could. Arya could not tell the time by the sun or stars. It was too dark for that, and the thick clouds seemed to cover the whole world in night. She knew the night had lasted longer than it was meant to. Perhaps it would last forever. Somewhere in the distance, a wolf howled and Arya stopped in her tracks to listen to it. She could not help but wonder if Nymeria had gotten far enough south. She was a smart creature. Surely she would know to run from the dead. When the snows fall and the cold winds blow, the lone wolf dies but the pack survives. The voice startled Arya and she turned to see Bran peering at her through the adjacent doorway. He was sitting before a fire, his hands folded in his lap, looking as calm as ever. Slowly, Arya relaxed and went to him. "Those are Father's words," Arya said. "He would be pleased to see us facing the end together, as a pack." She knelt beside Bran, warming her hands by the fire. "Maybe that means we'll survive." "Maybe," Bran said. He sounded neither hopeful nor resigned. She could glean no hints of the future from his expression. The distant wolf howl came again and his mouth twitched. "Nymeria has her pack at least." "Nymeria," Arya said, "so that is her." "Yes," Bran said. "She's been keeping close these past few days. You did tell her to look after us, didn't you?" "I did," Arya said with a small smile. "Have you had any wolf dreams since you've been here?" Bran asked. "I've barely had dreams at all. Sleep doesn't come easily in this place," Arya said. "Neither does warging. I could only ever manage it when I was desperate or afraid. It was a last resort." "Perhaps you'll manage it during this battle," Bran said. "There will be lots of chances to be afraid." "I don't doubt that," Arya said. "It's funny, isn't it? Father used to warn us that winter would come one day. He called us summer children. All we knew was the warmth and we didn't know what real cold felt like." "He was right," Bran said. "The warmth isn't what I miss about the long summer, though," Arya said. "I miss being a child who knew absolutely nothing of war." She looked at Bran. "Do you miss that too?" "Maybe," Bran said. "Now I know almost everything about war. I've seen so many of them, they almost blend together." "Would you give it up if you could?" "I can't give it up, so it doesn't matter." "But imagine that you could, would you?" Bran was silent for a long time, staring deep into the fire. "No, I don't think so. I'm not much use to our family in this chair. As the three-eyed raven, I might be able to save everyone." "You were useful to the family before you became the three-eyed raven," Arya murmured, resting a hand over his. "And it's not your job to save everyone, Bran." "Yes, it is," Bran said. He said it with absolute certainty. "We all have our parts to play in this war, and if I play my part right, everyone will be saved." "What about me?" Arya asked. "Is there anything I can do to play my part?" "Trust your instincts," Bran said. "That's it." "Yes, that's it." He looked up from the fire. I have to go now, I need to take a look around. I'll stay with you, Arya said. Bran gave her a small smile, then his eyes rolled back in his head. For a long time, Arya sat beside him and enjoyed the silence. She watched the fire dance in the hearth and wondered, not for the first time, what the red priests and priestesses saw about this night in the flames. She wondered what Bran saw as well. If they offered her a look into the future, would she see hope or despair? Better not to know, she decided. The future is too great a burden. A long time later, Bran's eyes snapped back into place. Arya looked up at him, her brow furrowed. What is it? The dead are nearly here, Bran murmured. He said it so softly that one could have mistaken it for a meaningless little statement, but those 5 little words made her chest seize with fear. She stood quickly to her feet. I'll spread the word. Bran nodded. All right. Arya hovered for a moment before she bent to hug Bran tightly. I'll see you again, Bran, before it's all over, and after. Bran smiled softly. I know. Without another word, Arya turned scrambled from the room, off to find as many of the commanders as she could. All the while, Bran's words echoed in her head. The dead are nearly here. The dead are nearly here. The dead are here. Tywin was writing a letter to be sent south to Queen Margaery when Jaime entered the room. He did not immediately look up as he was in the middle of a sentence. What is the state of the defences? The defences, Jaime asked. His voice was strangely quiet. You checked the defences at the western wall earlier, did you not? Tywin asked. Were there any gaps? No, Jaime said. We'll have a tight line all the way around the castle. By the looks of it, the southern wall is the least defended, but it's also the highest and there's no gate there. Not an ideal place from which to attack. Tywin finished the letter and set down his quill at last, looking up. Then what's wrong? Jaime did not answer immediately, and he did not look at him. He tapped his left hand against the back of a chair with something like irritation. Jaime, if you have something to say it before the dead arrive, Tywin said. Jaime exhaled. Do you remember when you sent Tyrion away? That's a ridiculous question. Of course I remember, Tywin said. What about it? I was just remembering that day, Jaime said. I remember Cersei yelling quite a bit because she was outraged that he had escaped. She still believed Tyrion had killed Joffrey. I knew he hadn't, of course. So did you, considering you had been the one to let him escape. But you couldn't pass up the opportunity to blackmail me into marriage. Jaime let out a single mirthless laugh. I was angry at the time, of course. You let Tyrion take the fall for a crime he didn't commit because it was convenient. That was 4 years ago now, Tywin said. And Tyrion has returned to Westeros. I don't see why this is relevant. I was just wondering if you'd ever found out who killed Joffrey, Jaime said, looking at him. You must have had Varys looking for the real culprit and many others. Even if Joffrey wasn't a very good king and tried to have you assassinated. Anyone who can get away with killing a king is dangerous. They could have been a threat to you or Tommen or any of the rest of the family. And you're not one to let threats to the family go unchecked. Tywin's eyes narrowed slightly. Unfortunately, the real culprit was never found, but they never did attack another member of the family, so it seems their business was with Joffrey and Joffrey alone. That is fortunate, Jaime said, but in case you're interested, the true culprit just gave me a full confession not long ago. Tywin exhaled. Frankly, it was surprising that Arya had gone this long without telling the truth to Jaime or anyone else she trusted. She had held her tongue for 4 years without fail. You and your wife are speaking again, I see. You knew, Jaime said. From the very beginning you knew it was Arya who killed Joffrey. A faceless man killed Joffrey, Tywin said. No money was exchanged. She said a name and nothing more. Let's not argue semantics, Jaime said. Arya is behind Joffrey's death, simple as that. And why should you care if she is? Tywin asked. You killed a wretched king yourself and escaped punishment. I can't imagine you've forgotten. It's not about the kingslaying. I don't begrudge her that, Jaime said. In fact, I'm not angry at Arya for killing Joffrey. I had no real love for the boy and he may have grown as dangerous as Aerys if given enough time. I'm angry that Tyrion was blamed for it. I'm angry because it sent Cersei spiraling into madness. But why should I be angry with Arya about that? It wasn't her fault, it was yours. You sent your son and daughter away to protect your new favourite child. You think that's what I was doing? Tywin asked. If I had punished Arya for killing the king, we would have launched into war with the North all over again, which was exactly what Joffrey and Lord Baelish wanted in the first place. And I was far more worried about Cersei's influence on Tommen than anything else when I sent her away. You can make whatever excuse you want, father. It won't erase the truth, Jaime said. We were all disappointments to you, weren't we? Me, Tyrion, Cersei. We were disappointments that you couldn't use for your perfect legacy. So you started over with a brand new daughter. You protected her and left 2 of your children to rot in exchange. Anger stirred in Tywin at the accusation. Your brother isn't exactly rotting. He's hand of a queen because I let him go rather than letting Cersei have him. And Cersei, she was far beyond my help. You'd like to think that, wouldn't you? Jaime asked. I don't think I know, Tywin asked. If she wasn't beyond help, then why couldn't you help her, Jaime? Jaime recoiled at the question almost as if Tywin had slapped him. He might as well have. It was the cruelest question he could ask. Jaime ran a hand through his hair, stepping away from the table. He seemed to be trying to catch his breath. I tried. At least you never did. Now Tywin looked away. This was ridiculous. It had nothing at all to do with their current situation. Cersei was long dead. Tyrion had returned to Westeros and was in a better position than ever. And with the Night King on his way south, what did any of this matter? What will happen, I wonder, if I die tomorrow? Jaime asked. Or if Arya dies, or both, all of your meddling will be for nothing. It's almost tempting. You will not put yourself in danger, Jaime, Tywin said firmly. Well, we'll all be in danger, won't we? But don't worry, I'll stay alive for as long as I can, just not for you. Jaime took a step back. I suppose Arya and I were a good match for each other in the end, 2 Kingslayers who escaped justice, quite a pair. He gave a mock bow. I wish you good fortune in the battle, father. Then, before Tywin could reply, his son stalked from the room. In the silence, Tywin felt a fresh wave of exhaustion. There was a reason that he had not wanted Arya to tell anyone, not even Jaime. Especially not Jaime. He had known the truth would make his son furious, and this wasn't the time for Jaime to be losing his head. But then again, perhaps the truth would make him less likely to protest when he found out Tywin's plans for after the war. That was a blessing at least. The door creaked and Tywin looked up to see Catelyn Stark standing in the doorway. Her expression was unreadable, but Tywin knew their voices must have carried past the door. 7 hells, Tywin thought. Lady Stark, how much did you hear? Just the very end, Catelyn said, closing the door behind her. So, Arya is a Kingslayer, is she? Which king? Her voice and expression were calm as she asked. It seemed a question that did not need answering. Joffrey, I expect. It's not a surprise that she found a way. It's just a surprise that you knew about it. I kept the secret to maintain peace in Westeros, Tywin said. Your daughter was meant to keep the secret too, and did apparently until she told Jaime. He exhaled. I assume you won't tell anyone. It could be dangerous for her if the secret spread. I won't tell anyone, Catelyn said softly. Everyone seems to have their own secrets these days, even people who seemed open and trustworthy. Shouldn't you be in the south right now? Tywin asked, hopping to change the subject. He hoped that the woman was honest about how much she heard. Her listening any longer was unthinkable. The last of the refugees have already gone. That was the plan, but Bran advised me against it, Catelyn said. It seems wise to heed him. I will be here for the duration of the battle. I see, Tywin said. I heard that the commanders who cannot fight with the other soldiers plan to command from one of the towers, Catelyn said. Yes, the King's Pyre, Tywin said. It has the best view of the battlefield. If we can see what is going on, we'll be able to command our soldiers to shift wherever they are needed. Good, Catelyn said. Then I will watch the battle from there as well. I'm sure the cellars would be a safer place for you, Tywin said. I'm not concerned with safety, Catelyn said. I would rather know what is happening than be safe. Besides, if the dead reach a tower in the centre of the keep, it means the battle may already be lost and most of my children dead. The Whites are welcome to take me then. Tywin exhaled. He was sure she would be impossible to argue with, and it wasn't as if her safety was his responsibility anyway. Suit yourself. Catelyn inclined her head, wandering over to the window to look out over the courtyard. Tywin leaned forward a bit, studying her. You came with another purpose as well. Yes, Catelyn said. I want to know what happens if we survive this war with the dead. Tywin folded his hands together. I imagine a great many things could happen. You know what I mean, Catelyn said. Robb told me about the meeting at the Dragon Pit. It was quite hostile until you met separately with Daenerys Targaryen. Now she seems completely cooperative with this cause. No one knows exactly what you said to her in that meeting, and it really doesn't interest me. I just want to know whether or not her cooperation is temporary, and if we might be seeing another war when this one is done." "I see," Tywin said. "Well, we won't. Daenerys Targaryen will take the throne when all is said and done, but she wishes to take the path with the least bloodshed. That's why she's helping us in the first place. She wants to be seen as a hero of Westeros." "People like to be seen as things they are not all the time," Catelyn said. "I still worry for my family." "If your son bends the knee, she will allow him to remain Warden of the North," Tywin said. "It isn't as if Robb did anything against her family. He was an infant when they fell." "That's true, but I cannot help but think what the Targaryens did to his grandfather and uncle," Catelyn said. "Can you say with certainty that she is not her father?" "No," Tywin said, "but if there is any madness in her, it has not taken yet, and there is more compassion in her, I suppose, than there ever was in him. It is better to take a chance on her ruling than fighting a war we can't win." "I think the entire country would prefer peace instead of war," Catelyn agreed, "but it seems unlikely that she would be willing to live in peace with you. You mentioned that the Dragon Queen would forgive Robb because he was not alive when her family fell. But you were alive. Daenerys Targaryen seems much less likely to pardon you." "It would make her look weak if she did," Tywin said. "Nonetheless, there will be peace, I've ensured it." "How?" "That's not really your concern, Lady Stark. You made my daughter a Lannister. If the Lannisters are in danger because of your actions during the rebellion, it's very much my concern." Tywin exhaled, tapping the table with 2 fingers. "Your daughter won't be in any danger, that I can promise." There was a long silence behind him as she seemed to mull over whether or not she could trust a promise from him, or perhaps she was wondering why he was so sure. In the silence, Tywin returned to his letter to Queen Margaery. The ink was dry now, and he carefully folded it. "Does Daenerys intend to pardon you for what you did during the rebellion?" Catelyn asked. Her tone was such that she seemed to have already guessed the answer. "No," Tywin said. "And you are not going to fight that," she said. Tywin sighed. "No." "So that's why you're sure you made a deal," Catelyn said. "Give yourself up for what? Your son's life, I expect. They don't call him Kingslayer for nothing." "I bought my son's life, yes," Tywin said, sealing the letter carefully. "As well as his continued control over the West. Jaime and Arya will inherit Casterly Rock after I am gone, and Lannisters will remain Wardens of the West." Catelyn did not reply for a long time, and Tywin looked up from the table. She was giving him the strangest expression. "What? You were worried about peace? This was one of the only ways to secure it, and it should improve relations between the Lannisters and the Starks. Considering you'll be dealing with your daughter from now on, this is nothing but advantageous for you." "You haven't told Arya, have you?" Catelyn murmured. It was the same question Tyrion had asked. Both of them seemed concerned about Arya's reaction, as if she had not endured much worse. "It's not relevant right now. There are more important matters at hand." "So it's another secret." Catelyn Stark let out a single, humorless laugh. "I've been finding out so many secrets lately. It seems everyone has some truth that they want to keep for the right time." "Sometimes it's necessary," Tywin said. "I'm sure it's easy to tell yourself that," Catelyn said, a bitter note to her voice. She was clearly upset about something else, some secret which Tywin did not know. "But why haven't you told Arya about this, honestly?" "It's a distraction she doesn't need," Tywin said. "Because it will hurt her," Catelyn said. "It will hurt her a great deal, and you know it." Hurt, there was no reason that Arya Stark should feel pain in regards to his death. She had been his hostage for years in all but name, and he had used her wherever was convenient for him. She had saved his life once before, but it was only to protect her brother. She might protest his death because that was the kind of person she was, but hurt seemed a strong word. "I don't see why she should mourn for me." "Neither do I, but she will," Catelyn said. "You must know that in the back of your mind. Why else would you keep this plan from her?" Tywin was beginning to grow irritated again. Apparently, this was the day that particularly stubborn people saw fit to argue with him. This was exactly why he had kept these secrets. They were only proving his point by arguing with him at the end of the bloody world. "I know that you care for her," Catelyn said. It seemed as if she had to force the words out. "As much as someone like you can, at least. It took me a long time to come to terms with that, but you are blind if you cannot see that she cares for you." Was he blind? Tywin had been blind about things before, especially his children. He never felt particularly blind around Arya though. He could always read when she was telling a lie. He could tell when she was afraid. He could tell when she wasn't sleeping or was just barely holding herself together. He understood the smallest shift in her expression, but it still didn't make sense that his death should hurt her. "Once the Night King is defeated, I will tell her," Tywin said. "She will see that this arrangement is the best option. She's not a fool." Catelyn exhaled, looking back out the window, at last finished arguing the point. Thank the gods for that. Tywin had no wish to continue this line of conversation. "I expect you to keep the arrangement a secret until then as well," Tywin said. "I'm sure you do not want your daughter to be distracted in battle, and the truth about what happened to Joffrey, that would be even more dangerous." "I'll keep the secret. It's not exactly mine to tell, is it?" Catelyn asked. "I've become a keeper of many secrets over the past few days." Tywin could not help but wonder what those other secrets might be, but he knew if he pried it might just lead to another argument, and he was tired of those. A long silence lapsed between them, and at last Catelyn Stark turned from the window, starting toward the door. But she stopped when she heard something, the sound of footsteps rushing up the hall. Tywin stood, anticipating a message. Moments later, Arya burst through the door, gasping for breath as if she had sprinted all the way up the stairs. "They're here," she muttered. "Bran says the dead are here." The words echoed through the room like a stone dropped into a very deep well. Tywin glanced from Catelyn Stark to Arya, then he released a breath. "All right, is everyone in position?" "In position or moving in that direction," Arya said. "Good, then we'll see what all of this preparation is worth," Tywin said. "Lady Stark, we should go to the tower." "Right, of course." Catelyn Stark let out a tremulous breath, crossing to her daughter and pulling her into a tight hug. "You'll be on the wall, won't you?" "Yes," Arya said. "Don't worry. The northern wall is well fortified. I'll be fine." "I know you will be." Catelyn clasped her face in her hands. "Come back to me, sweet girl, promise it." Arya nodded once. "I promise." She stepped back from her mother and glanced up at Tywin. She opened her mouth as if wanting to say something, but no words came out. "Make sure the wall holds for as long as you can," Tywin said. "If reinforcements do come from the twins, we need to give them time." "I will," she said. "And if the walls do fall, retreat to the main hall. Don't wait too long or you'll be overwhelmed." "I know," she looked up at him. "Do you have any other orders?" She was afraid. She would never admit it, of course, but he could hear it in her voice and see it in her eyes. He exhaled, reaching out and resting a hand on her shoulder. "No, just don't do anything reckless and come back alive." Arya nodded. "I will, my lord." She lingered for a moment longer, glancing from him to her mother. Then she hurried back down the steps, closing the door to the tower room behind her. Beside him, Lady Catelyn cupped a hand over her mouth and paced away from the door. She knew as well as he did that she might never see any of her children alive again after this night. But the moment of weakness was brief. She let her hand drop from her mouth and her expression turned steely again. "All right, to the tower then." Tywin nodded once. From the tower they would watch the great battle of their lives begin, and end if they were lucky. Now we see how long this long night lasts, Tywin thought, and who lives to see the dawn. Jaime was still buzzing with anger from his confrontation with the ever-immovable Lord of Casterly Rock when the word came that the dead had arrived. It occurred to him that an argument made for a terrible last interaction with one's father, but then again, it was typical of their complicated relationship. Their family never had been one for soft words or teary farewells. He did find time to say farewell to Tyrion, of course, though there were no tears. His brother was on his way to the tower where the other commanders who could not fight would watch the battle, and Jaime was on the way to the western wall to command the Lannister troops. Between the two of them, Jaime was more at risk of death, but he feared for his little brother all the same. "You should fear for me," Tyrion said. "I'll be in the same space as father for gods know how long. My only solace is that my very presence should irritate him the entire battle." "Best of luck with that." Jaime looked down at him to see he had an axe stuck in his belt. "I see you have a weapon just in case." "Well, I'm not a great warrior like you, but I have killed in a battle before," Tyrion said. "If Harrenhal falls, I'll go down chopping off white legs." "I hope I'll live long enough to see it." Jaime rested a hand on his shoulder. "Until later, little brother." Tyrion rested a hand over his. "Until later." Jaime continued on his way toward the western wall, ducking around other trembling soldiers scrambling to get to their places. Across the outer ward, he saw Arya rushing toward the northern wall. Their eyes met for a moment, and she gave him a nod. Part of him wanted to cross to her in that moment, but he did not want to say goodbye to her. He did not want to even entertain the idea that she might die in the battle. "Sir Jaime." Jaime jumped as Bran Stark appeared at his elbow. He was being escorted to the godswood by a small woman with curly brown, along with a rather large group of the Brotherhood. "Bran," Jaime inclined his head, "I wish you good fortune in the battle." "Thank you," Bran said, "but your sword will help me more than your wishes." Jaime's brow furrowed. "What do you?" "I will need your help in the godswood," Bran said. "When the second trench falls, come to me there with a few good men." "You could find better protectors than me," Jaime said. "I'm not the knight I used to be when I had both hands." "One hand will be enough," Bran said. "You did promise me, didn't you, that if I was ever in need of anything, no matter what it is, you would do your best to help me, to settle our debt?" Jaime swallowed hard. "Yes, I did." "Good," Bran said. "Then I will see you when the trenches fall." When, not if. Bran was sure that their exterior defences would not hold, and he was clearly sure that he would need Jaime in the godswood. For what, Jaime could not begin to guess, but he had not made that vow to Bran Stark lightly. "I wonder if he has seen me die there," Jaime thought, surrounded by trees carved with faces. He supposed he would find out soon enough. "Don't stay up here for long," Arya told Sansa as they stood together by the great hall. "For the start of the battle perhaps, but as soon as it gets bad, barricade yourself in the cellar." "I will," Sansa said. "I wish I could convince Mother to do the same." "I heard her say she would be in the tower," Arya said. "Yes," Sansa said. "With the other generals who can't fight, there are still risks to being there, of course, but I might join her if I wasn't carrying a child." "Mother will be safe enough up there," Arya said. "Lord Tywin would be in that tower as well. If the dead managed to climb over the wall, it would be easy enough to blockade the doors, though it would only be a temporary fix. It's well defended, plenty of siege weapons as well in case the dragon appears, and he won't be targeting the generals, he'll be targeting Bran." "Let's hope to the gods that the Dragon Queen arrives in time then," Sansa said. Arya nodded once, then she drew a dragon glass dagger from her belt. "Here, take this just in case." "I've never killed anything before," Sansa murmured. "Thank the gods you won't have to, these whites are already dead." Arya forced a smile. "I've seen you grab a knife with your bare hand. If a white comes at you, I know you can handle yourself. Take it." Sansa swallowed hard and accepted the dagger. "Stay safe, Arya." "I'll see you after the battle," Arya promised. Sansa pulled her a quick hug. Then they parted and Arya hurried toward the northern wall. On the way she passed Oberyn, who was ordering a group of soldiers toward the eastern wall. She passed Gendry, who was working to pass out as many weapons as possible, and she took a cluster of dragon glass arrows from him, giving him a small nod. As she climbed the steps to the northern wall, she passed Beric, who grasped her shoulder and gave her an encouraging smile. There was no need for words. The Brotherhood was with her, and they would defend the living until their last breath. At last she took her place atop the battlements. Merwin and Thomas stood on either side of her, grasping tight to their swords. When she turned to look at them, she could see their throats bob up and down when they swallowed. Both of them were veterans of many dangerous wars and had survived difficult odds, but they knew that this was their most difficult fight yet. She waited for a long moment in the icy darkness, watching her breath cloud the air in front of her. The first horn blew, then the second, then the third. And the darkness, the blue eyes began to appear. Chapter 97, The Battle of Harrenhal. When Arya was a child and the long summer was still at its peak, she used to venture into Weirwood with her siblings to catch bugs of all sizes. It vexed Septa Mordine terribly, as well as their mother. But Arya's favourite bugs to catch were the glowing one's-moon bugs, her father called them, because their white light shone in the darkness. Sometimes, on the warmest nights, the forest would absolutely fill with them, and it would be like walking amongst the stars. Arya was reminded of that little memory as she stared out into the darkness from the walls of Harrenhal. From this distance, the blue eyes could be mistaken for a swarm of moon bugs, but Arya knew better than that, and their thousands of eyes filled her with icy dread. "How many are there?" Thomas muttered under his breath. "I don't think I want to know," Merwin replied. "Too many," Beric said, hurrying to Arya's side. "And not just on this side. They're moving to surround us. The western wall and the eastern wall are facing just as many." "It's the smart play," Arya said. The Night King will be testing for gaps. Do you know about the southern wall? None yet, but they're still moving into position, Beric said. We're well defended all the way around. Arya nodded once, resting a hand on the dagger stuck in her belt. Bran had given it to her some time ago and asked her to keep it close, but she did not see what help it would be against this many. There was a whoosh from above and Arya glanced to her right to see the first of the siege weapons firing from the Widow's Tower. Great, flaming projectiles soared high overhead, and she tracked their path with her gaze until they crashed back to the ground. For just a moment the shadows of the dead were illuminated, as if by a flash of lightning, and Arya felt a shiver go through her. There were so many. Most of them were once human, but Arya was sure she saw the shadow of a giant once. And the shadows of other inhuman creatures as well. They did not have enough ammunition for them all. The dead did not move for a long moment. They stood and took the abuse of the flame and rock, still and unafraid. After all, why should the dead fear dying again? Below, in front of the northern gate, Arya could see the soldiers shifting nervously. Some of them were Westerlanders, others Riverlanders, some Dornish, others from the Reach, and each and every one had fear of death and the dead that brought it. Hold, someone said, and the projectile stopped. For a long moment a deathly silence fell over the keep and all of the land around it. Then Arya watched the blue eyes flicker in the shadows. They were advancing, and not at a slow pace either. A sprint. They were sprinting for the walls. Light the trench, someone commanded to her right. Light the trench, she called out on instinct, echoing the command. And the archers lit their arrows and rushed to do their bidding, firing at the first trench. Arya waited and watched, hopping to see a blaze of flames. But the trench would not light. No matter how many fiery arrows they loosed upon it, it would not light. The soldiers down below tried to set it ablaze with torches, but those too seemed to go out before they could make a difference. The trenches will mean nothing without fire, Arya thought. The dead do not fear pointed bits of wood. She drew in a shaky breath. This was not a good start at all, and if they could not hold the dead at bay for at least a little while, they could not hope to even last the night. Then something strange happened. Below, the gate opened and Arya looked over the edge to see the red woman walking out from the safety of the walls. She could tell it was her without seeing her face. The red of her clothing stood out against the snow. The soldiers stood to defend her as she crossed to first trench, calm as could be. It was as if the blue-eyed dead were not racing toward the keep at top speed. She set her hand upon the trench. "What is she doing?" Arya asked. "Praying for a miracle," Beric replied. A miracle was much needed right now, and Arya watched with wide eyes as the dead drew closer and closer, practically running over each other in order to reach the living. But then, suddenly something sparked. The trench burst into flame, starting from Melisandre's hands and rippling across the rest of the trench. Arya watched in amazement as the fire shot all the way around the keep, forming a protective barrier that stopped the dead in their tracks. The approaching horde stilled at the sight of the fire, skidding to a stop. At once they stopped snarling and snapping. Instead they calmly lined up just beyond the flames, as if they had forgotten their bloodlust in an instant. Illuminated by the trench, they were truly horrifying. Some had most of their faces intact with only stray wounds on their cheeks. For others, their flesh was torn away, revealing the bones of their jaw and the sockets of their eyes. Some were little more than skeletons, only barely keeping their feet, but they all had the same dead blue gazes that made Arya shiver. Beyond the fire they shifted in silence. A few clacked their teeth or let out a guttural cry, but none tried to bypass the fire. "Let's see how long that buys us time," Merwin muttered. "We have 2 trenches at least," Thomas said. "Plenty of defences." "Yes, but if they figure out how to get past one trench, the second won't be a problem," Arya said, shifting her grip on her bow. She was tempted to shoot the whites at the front just to chip away at their numbers, but it was not wise to waste arrows. Better to save them for the White Walkers. Speaking of which, she hadn't seen a single White Walker yet. If they were smart, they would hide amongst their troops. Killing just one of them destroyed a great deal of soldiers. But Arya hoped that at least a few would present themselves soon. She longed to put an arrow between their eyes. The stillness of the army of the dead bothered Arya more than anything, and if she wondered if they were still all the way around, she glanced to Thomas. "Circle the walls, Thomas. See if they are making any moves there and let me know." Thomas nodded and set off at once on his mission, leaving Arya to wait. A particularly chilling wind swept over her, and she pulled her cloak tighter around her. "I'm in the blood of Winterfell," she told herself. "I will not fall to cold." The only one who did not seem bothered by the chill was Melisandre. She stood at the base of the wall behind the second trench, watching her flames dance in the night. How calm she looked and how still. If the dead bothered her, she did not show it openly. The same could not be said for the soldiers in front of her. They stood between the inner trench and the walls, ready to hold off the dead if they did break past the first wall of flames. But if that happened, many might die before the trench was lit. Hopefully, the archers would be able to aid them and give them a chance to retreat inside. The time passed at a crawl, and Arya could not begin to say how long they had been standing there before Thomas returned to her side with news. "They're still surrounding us on 3 sides, lady, just staring and waiting." "What the fuck are they waiting for?" Merwin asked. "I don't know, but Thomas is right. It feels like they're stalling," Arya said. She wondered, not for the first time, where the Night King might be. Was he hiding in the clouds above? If that was the case, it was smarter to attack now before the other dragons reached Harrenhal, so he must be somewhere else. But where? A flash of movement caught her eye, and she saw one of the whites move forward to the wall of flames. But instead of attempting to walk through, it simply flopped down on top of the trench, impaling itself on a wooden spike. Second white followed its example, then a third. Then suddenly many whites were moving forward, piling onto the trench, and as they sacrificed themselves, the fires began to dampen. "Archers," Arya called out, "shoot any white that crosses that barrier, light the second trench." The archers obeyed, drawing back their bows. The first white managed to clamber over its brethren to safety, only to receive an arrow to the face, but more and more followed after him, unworried by the prospect of death. Lady Melisandre was already at the second trench, placing her hand on the wood, murmuring the same prayer. A white lunged for her and Merwin put an arrow through its chest. A second made the same attempt, and Arya managed to score a hit through its neck. Beric struck one down as well from a few paces to the right. "I wish your Lord of Light would answer prayers a bit more quickly," Arya snapped. "Don't rush miracles, my lady," Beric said. "We're lucky to even have his fire." "Maybe, but I still wouldn't mind a rush on this one," Arya said. Some of the whites had managed to get past the second trench, and their front lines were trying to beat them back. They were doing an excellent job, but soon they would be overwhelmed. Arya cursed and knocked another arrow, preparing to loose it again. But just then fire burst from the trench, racing along the wood and creating a solid wall of flame. This fire seemed to burn brighter and higher than the last, too high for the whites to easily smother with their bodies. "There you see," Beric said, "all in his time." Arya let out a breath of both relief and annoyance, shooting her arrow into the skull of one of the whites that had broken the lines. "Open the northern gate. Let the front lines retreat inside before they find a way past this trench too." She heard another one of the commanders on the northern wall call for the same thing. At once the gate opened and the soldiers filtered back through the opening, one line at a time. Melisandre remained outside as they did, holding her hand out, keeping the flames high. Then, just as the last of their soldiers entered the keep, she backed away from the trench and into the safety of the castle. The intensity of the flames did not fade even after the gate closed. Still, Arya found it hard to celebrate. They still had not seen a single White Walker, nor had they seen the dragon. Somewhere in their ranks there were giants, perhaps other terrible creatures that could step straight over the flames, and she did not mean to tempt fate by letting down her guard. "It stalls them at least," Thomas said. "Yes," Arya murmured. A few more projectiles from the siege weapons were unleashed into the darkness, and Arya watched the fiery orbs crush the dead beneath their weight. They only made dents in the large army. Small dents, it would not be enough. "A lucky thing we didn't find her when we stormed Dragonstone," Thomas continued. "The Red Woman, I mean. She was with Stannis then, wasn't she? We were told to look out for her." "I remember," Merwin said. "Thank the gods we missed her." "Seems like a long time ago now," Thomas said. "I'd rather be back there than here." "Or at the Twins," Merwin said. "Or Winterfell or Casterly Rock. I like fighting the living better than the dead." Arya caught sight of movement from beyond the flames, almost as if the whites were shifting to allow others through. She squinted, trying to see if there was anything special about this new group of dead men. They did not appear to be White Walkers. "We'll beat them yet," Thomas continued. "There's still a wall between us, and it's a bloody difficult wall to climb. Let's see them." He did not get any further as suddenly an arrow struck him in the chest and sent him reeling back off the battlements. Arya's eyes widened. 7 hells they had archers. "Take cover," Arya cried out. She took her own advice, ducking behind the wall as arrows sailed overhead. Her breath caught in her throat as she watched the bolts rain down on the soldiers just past the wall, and amongst them she saw Thomas, who had toppled from the wall and broken his neck in the fall. His last expression was one of fear. Jon had said that he had not seen the dead use bows and arrows before, but apparently the Night King was saving them for exactly this occasion. Certainly they were not accurate shots, but enough arrows in the sky could make a dent in any army. The soldiers on the ground rushed forward to collect the dead and drag them toward the bear pit. None of the dead could be left unburned, lest they rise and fight them, but still Arya's heart clenched when they took away Thomas. She glanced at Merwin, crouched behind the wall just beside her, whose face was flecked with the blood of his friend. He looked right back at her, his gaze full of fear and fury. "If the whites are mindless," Beric muttered from Arya's other side, "a White Walker must be controlling their shots." He was right. A White's instinct was to attack and kill. They must be commanded to do anything else. Hide, wait, draw an arrow and loose it on the living. Arya carefully pushed herself just high enough to peek over the wall. The dead were shifting again, and this time they shifted for something different. A single, pale figure, clad in black armor, was stepping to the front, a bow in hand. It was strung with an arrow made of ice, and she was sure he had more in his quiver. She watched as he drew the bow carefully, but he did not fire it up at the walls. He fired it at the trench. The bolt struck the fire, but instead of the flames melting it like it might normal ice, a wave of cold seemed to burst from the arrow, smothering the fire at once. It was a ripple effect across the trench. Suddenly a huge section went dark completely. "Seven hells," Arya muttered. She stood, firing her own arrow at the walker, but a group of whites surrounded him, forming an effective wall. Her bolt took one of the soldiers and not their master. The White Walker seemed to smirk in the darkness, drawing another arrow. Arya was forced to duck again to avoid his attack. "Archers," she called out, "listen to me. There is a White Walker just past the second trench, surrounded by whites. Target him, not the whites. Target him on my signal." She watched the terrified archers knock their arrows and prepare. 3, 2, 1. The archers rose, and she rose with them, and they let their dragon glass arrows fly. They struck the soldiers surrounding the White Walker, but he remained standing and sneering. Once again he loosed an arrow at Arya. She ducked narrowly behind the wall but rose again in the same moment, shooting a bolt in his direction. This time she caught him in the head and he shattered. The white archers that stood with him shattered in the same moment, but it was not enough. Other dead men not tied to the White Walker had already flooded across the gap in the trench, and though they tried to light it again with flaming arrows, they went out before they could take. They could not send Melisandre out the gate again. She would never make it. Now they had to defend the walls. The godswood of Harrenhal was cursed, they said, just like the rest of the castle. Where most weirwood trees had faces carved to look stern and wise, the face of this weirwood tree was twisted. In the shadows it rather looked like it was screaming, and its red tears ran thick from its eyes. It was not a scream of fear, Bran decided, but one of pure hatred. There were 13 deep cuts carved into this tree, and maybe that was the source of its hatred. They were placed there by Daemon Targaryen, one for each day that he waited for his nephew Aemon Targaryen to meet him in battle. On the 13th day, they fought on their dragons above the god's eye, and Daemon slew his kin by leaping from the back of a dragon to drive his sword through his eye and out the back of his skull. Both men and both dragons fell into the lake below, and all 4 died. This was an unhappy place, and it had seen so much misery. The 13 cuts were just some of the many scars on this wood and on this keep. It was here that Aegon the Conqueror first showed the true power of his dragons when he burned Harren the Black alive. It was here that so many unlucky lords and ladies perished as they failed to hold the great castle. It was here that one of the greatest battles of the Dance of the Dragons was fought, and it was here that the seeds of Robert's rebellion were planted, when at a tourney, Prince Rhaegar crowned Lyanna Stark the Queen of Love and Beauty. This place had a way of shaping history, and this old tree had watched it all. As had Bran, he felt a sort of sympathy for its wretched face. It was a burden to see so much and be unable to do anything at all about it, only grow and watch. "The battle is starting," Mira murmured from beside him. She was watching the sky, tracking the fire of the siege weapons. "Yes," Bran murmured, "and I must go." He slipped from reality and into the head of his many ravens, taking in the sights around him. The second trench was about to fall, even despite the efforts of the Lady Melisandre, but she had delayed them at least. That was the most important thing she could do. Delay them. A few extra hours, minutes, or seconds could be the difference between life and death. The pyre in the bear pit was already lit, and had accepted its first few victims of the long night. If Bran had wished, he could have dipped into the lives of each and every one of those men who were set to burn, but he did not have the time. To the north, Robb and his armies were advancing as quickly as they could, along with Daenerys on her dragon and Jon on his. Bran was keeping an eye on the Green One, making sure that it did not try to rebel against its new rider, but it seemed that Rhaegal was beginning to accept its master. Daenerys Targaryen might not be happy about it. But Jon could always blame Bran for this and claim ignorance and innocence. He needed Jon on a dragon, it was necessary. But beyond that, Bran had a more crucial task which was beginning to vex him. The Night King. He had been searching tirelessly for him. He had gone further north to see if the Night King might be lying in wait for his armies to do damage before he swooped in from above. He had gone south to see if the Night King might have made a play for King's Landing in the chaos. He had gone above the clouds to search for the undead dragon and its new rider, but the Night King was carefully eluding him. What is the smartest play, Bran thought. Think of how he moves. Think of how he thinks. He will not hang back. He wants to strike a decisive blow. So where will he? Bran stopped as it dawned on him, a gap in his plan. He had assumed, as soon as the army of the dead set a quick pace south, that they would come to Harrenhal as quickly as possible with few detours. Leaving some soldiers behind at the Twins was predictable and a good way to split their armies. It did not require any detours. But there was one place north of Harrenhal, which they had not evacuated, one that would have been extremely difficult for the dead men to navigate on foot, and for that reason, Bran knew the army would not go there. But dragons had no such limits. They had proved as much at this very castle over 3 centuries ago when they showed that a stone keep was no protection against dragon fire. A dragon could fly easily above mountains, which men struggled to climb. Bran dipped into the mines of ravens a bit further north and east, searching as rapidly as he could. His eyes flew through the hills and mountains of the Vale, searching, until he came upon a great host struggling through the narrow mountain pass. Some were soldiers and others were bakers, some were nobles and others were peasants, but they all had blue eyes now, the mark of the freshly dead. And there, just above the clouds, between the peaks of 2 mountains, Bran saw him. He sat on the back of a pale dragon with glowing blue eyes, clad all in black armor, a sword and javelin of ice strapped to his back. In the light of the moon, there was something eerily beautiful about the Night King and his undead steed, and the great beats of the dragon's wings echoed like Bran's heartbeat. Slowly, the Night King turned his head to look into the eyes of the raven which Bran inhabited, and when he smiled, Bran swore he could taste death. Bran snapped back into his own body, letting out a breath, reminding himself that he was not yet dead. He became aware of a new presence in front of him, Jaime Lannister. He had come just as he asked him to. He wondered how long he had been waiting there. "You're here," Bran said. "The second trench has fallen," Jaime said, "so yes." The words rattled Bran's other guards, but he only nodded. "Thank you for coming, and now, will you send one of your men as a messenger to your father?" "Yes, of course," Jaime said. "What message do you wish to send him?" "The Night King is almost here," Bran said, "and he's bringing reinforcements." There were 5 great towers at Harrenhal, all built as monuments to the strength and arrogance of Harren the Black centuries ago. When Harren built them then, he did not know that they would be the death of him, nor did he likely expect their eventual names. The towers encircled the flowstone yard which sat at the eastern part of the keep. There were 3 along the southern edge and 2 on the northern edge. The southernmost towers, the Tower of Dread, the Wailing Tower and the Tower of Ghosts, were once all connected by bridges, but the bridge to the Tower of Ghosts had crumbled long ago, and the bridge between the Tower of Dread and the Wailing Tower looked as if it meant to crumble at any second. The Widow's Tower and the largest tower of all, King's Pyre, still had a sturdy bridge between them at least. The King's Pyre had once been much taller, but its uppermost levels had been shorn away by dragon fire centuries ago. Harren the Black had roasted alive in that very tower, hence its name. Though many of the towers were crumbling at the top, they were all usable in some form, and 5 towers was an ideal number for the defence of this castle. 4 of the towers were outfitted with siege weapons, each focused in a different direction. The Widow's Tower defended the northern wall, the Tower of Ghosts defended the eastern wall, the Wailing Tower defended the south, and the Tower of Dread defended the west. That left the King's Pyre Tower for the commanders who would not fight the dead head-on. Tywin expected at least some of the towers to fall when the undead dragon made its appearance, but naturally, it would target the siege weapons rather than a small grouping of generals who were no threat. There were a few scorpions stationed in the king's pyre, but they would not fire unless the situation grew desperate. Tywin did not mean to project his location or any other commander's location like Harren the Black did. Of course, if they were lucky, none of the towers would fall. One of the scorpion bolts would take down the dragon, or else one of Daenerys Targaryen's beasts would do the job, but Tywin was not one to rely on luck. He stood at one of the crumbling tower windows, looking off across the northern wall as the second trench caught fire and beat back the army of the dead. He knew somehow that it would not last long. The trenches were only meant to hold the dead back for a time so that they could wear down on their numbers with siege weapons. The failure of the trenches did not worry him. If the walls fell on the other hand, well, the rest of the battle would be a relatively short affair. In the King's Pyre Tower, many other commanders were crowded, especially all of those who would not fight on the front lines. All were willing to fight if it was required of them, but battles quickly fell apart when their top commanders risked their lives for glory. There were several Tyrell and Lannister bannermen, as well as some older Dornish commanders and a few unsullied, though the latter two groups kept to themselves, knowing that there was still quite a bit of hostility toward them from some of the Westeros lords. Catelyn Stark was, of course, among them as well. She kept watch at a window in the corner, sitting on the edge of a chair. If the battle frightened her, she did not show it. Her expression was cool and calm. And then there was Tyrion. His son had been one of the last to come to the tower, a flask in one hand and an axe in the other. It would have been wiser for him to go south to King's Landing, especially if he wanted to live to advise the Dragon Queen when this was all over. But then, Tyrion had always been very stubborn. The second trench, one of the commanders said, something just put out a chunk of the northern side. The western side too, the fire is failing. Tywin's eyes narrowed. The dead had dampened the first fire with their falling bodies. They had not put it out suddenly, so what had? Nearby him, Tyrion took a swig of something from a flask at his hip, looking nervous. Tywin gave him a look. Now isn't the time to drink. We're not all made of stone like you, father, Tyrion said. Now is the perfect time to drink, or did you not notice the size of our opponent? I noticed, Tywin said. That's why I'm keeping a clear head. Tyrion sighed. Jaime said you'd say something like that. And now he's defending the western wall without drinking, as he should. Tyrion lifted his chin. Would you like me to join him, father? I'd be glad to offer my combat abilities. I'm quite fearsome in battle. When all else fails, you resort to jokes. As usual, Tywin said. Well, I have to make enough jokes for the both of us, father, since you have no sense of humour, Tyrion said. But it's actually not entirely untrue. Ask Lady Stark. She once saw me kill a man of the Hill tribes. Catelyn looked up from her seat at the window. I did, with a shield. And I killed more than one man at the Battle of the Blackwater, Tyrion said. I'm not entirely useless in battle. I'm only up here because my queen values me for my mind more than my axe. Tywin exhaled. Use your mind by all means, and until you do, you might keep silent. Tyrion shrugged and strolled away from Tywin, taking another pointed drink as he did. He wished to project an air of calm and good humour, but Tywin could see his hand shaking around his flask. Soon after, a messenger burst into the tower. There had been a steady stream of them since the battle started, bringing important information which they could not discern from the tower. Tywin recognized this boy as one of Tyrion's companions, though he could not even begin to remember his name. He bowed quickly. The Whites have killed some of our defenders on the wall with arrows, the boy said. They have archery capabilities that we did not expect, and it was the White Walkers that put out the second trench with some sort of arrows of their own. There were 3 spotted, one on the northern, eastern and western sides. The ones to the north and west are dead. The eastern one disappeared into the crowd. Damn, the Whites having any capability with archers was bad news. Tywin knew they must be terrible shots, but an arrow could often accidentally hit its target. A wall of arrows could prove fatal to soldiers. What happened when the White Walkers were killed? Several Whites around them fell, the boy said. It's impossible to tell how many, my lord, but enough to make a difference. Tell the commanders at the walls to keep targeting the White Walkers then, Tywin said. They'll hide as long as they can, but they are our principal targets. And make sure all of the fallen are burned immediately. That includes the ones who are sure to die. The boy nodded and hurried from the room with all haste. We should shift some of our forces from the southern wall, Tully spoke up. It's the highest of the walls anyway, and there's no gate. If the dead try to enter the castle, they won't try there. That's why they haven't surrounded that wall. They know we wouldn't be able to make an escape from that direction, Kevin said. There wouldn't be much point. Better to focus their forces on the other walls. No, Tyrion spoke up. No, keep the same defences at the southern wall. With what purpose? Tully asked. There's no immediate threat to the southern wall. No immediate one, yes, Tyrion said. But it does seem a bit suspicious, doesn't it? The Night King has more than enough troops to surround the entirety of the keep. We've seen his numbers from the window. Why leave a whole wall open? Unless, of course, he hopes for us to shift our troops away to areas that are more in danger. It may make it easier for his whites to scale the wall. Scale the wall? Tully seemed incredulous. Walls that high can't be scaled. Forgive me, Lord Tully, but it's possible that they can, Tyrion said flatly. You were not present for our first strategy meeting in King's Landing, so you would not know. But Jon Snow, who has seen these creatures move more than any of us, suggested that the dead have no regards for their own lives, and, if need be, could pile on top of each other in order to let one single soldier get to the top. We've already seen them fall on fire in order to allow others to cross the trenches. That may be true, another commander spoke up, some other Tyrell bannerman whose name Tywin did not recall, but if they can climb the walls, they could climb over at any point. We need to focus our defences where they are attacking. But not at the expense of creating an opening, Tyrion said. I'm almost sure that the dead sent some of their soldiers south to launch a surprise attack when we are most focused on defending the other walls. We'll be nearly overwhelmed and not paying attention, and they could take us from behind. Once the dead enter the keep, our chances of survival drop by quite a bit. Tywin studied his son. His claim did have validity. Everything Bran Stark had said about the Night King cast him as a clever opponent. It would be wise to draw the forces of the living away from one wall, especially if he had the means to cross it. In a normal war there would be no question. No human army could climb the southern wall, but this was not a normal war, and if they treated it as one, they might die. Lord Tyrion is right, Catelyn Stark spoke up from her place at the corner window. We should keep the southern wall defended. No one asked for your opinion, Lady Stark, Tully said. You should not even be here. You are welcome to force me to leave then, Catelyn turned to face him. But a few days ago Bran warned me not to leave and go south. I didn't understand it at the time. This is not the safest place to be. But if he peered into the future and saw the dead sweeping over the last of the refugees, his reasoning makes sense. There will be an attack from the south. Tully opened his mouth to protest, but Tywin cut in. We'll keep the same defences at the southern wall, Tywin said. Our situation is not so desperate that we need shift our formation, and there is some validity to these suspicions. This is a defensive battle, and we cannot be too eager to play into the Night King's hands. That ended the discussion soundly, and the other generals returned to discussing ways to shore up the defences of the walls. Tyrion seemed surprised at Tywin's words, though perhaps Tywin very rarely suggested that his thoughts had any value. In this case, at least, they did. It was fortunate that the wine had not dulled his thoughts too greatly. The messengers continued as the eternal night went on. The walls were holding on every side. The dead had begun to pile on top of each other just as Tyrion had theorized, attempting to clamber over their defences, but the dragon glass spikes and the soldiers behind them were doing their job, keeping them down. Only one more White Walker had exposed themselves, and that White Walker was felled on the western side, narrowly preventing a breach in the defences. The other White Walkers were well hidden and patient. Still, Tywin could sense that the dead were not attacking in full force. They were merely testing the defences, seeing if they could make an easy conquest, or perhaps hoping that they would give and send more of their soldiers away from the southern side, if Tyrion's theory was correct. He could not shake an impending sense of dread that the worst was yet to come. The dragon has not yet appeared, he thought, and neither has the Night King. Then another messenger came with news, this time from Brandon Stark. Bran Stark has seen the Night King and the dragon, the messenger gasped out. He's almost here, and he is not coming alone. Where is he coming from? Tywin asked. The messenger was pale as a sheet, from the Vale. Tywin stared at the messenger for a long time before he crossed back to the northern window where Catelyn Stark was still keeping watch. She was pale as a sheet, and her fingers were clenched together so tightly that it seemed she might snap one off. Tywin only had to glance out the window to see why. The clouds had parted just enough to allow the moonlight through, and it illuminated thousands of dead approaching the keep from the northeast, tens of thousands, from the Vale. Then came a distant thud like thunder. Tywin thought it might be for a moment, but then it came again and again, steady as a drum or the beat of wings. At first he saw only the tail slipping through the cloud bank, caught in the light of the moon. The rest of the creature followed soon afterward. The dragon was nearly as large as the black beast Daenerys Targaryen rode, and its blue eyes shone bright in the dark. From this distance Tywin could not make out its rider, but he did not need to. He knew exactly sat atop the dragon's back. The Night King had finally arrived, and he brought the 7 hells with him. Chapter 98, Beneath the Bleeding Tree. Bran's message had shaken Catelyn to her very core. The Night King and his dragon had appeared at Harrenhal, bringing the doom of the living with them. And yet she could barely process that. All she could think of in that moment was Lysa. Catelyn knew her younger sister was dead even if she could not see her face amongst the soldiers. She must be gone. They had grown apart over the years and their last interactions were anything but kind. But still she was my sister. Her little sister who used to follow her around everywhere and fret over whether or not they would get in trouble for sneaking down to the river. Her little sister who used to dress in whatever colours Catelyn chose because she wanted to look alike. Gods above, whatever she had become, it was that young girl who Catelyn remembered. And she was gone. The undead dragon let out a screech, swooping upward and disappearing once again into the clouds, leaving its new recruits to begin to swarm the walls. The other lords scattered to the windows, searching to see where the dragon would appear again. Catelyn did not move. Lady Catelyn, Tyrion stood near her. Are you all right? My sister, Catelyn said. I think my sister must be dead, if what Bran says if true. Maybe not, Tyrion said. I doubt. The Night King had time to cover all of the Vale. But he almost certainly went to the Eyrie, Catelyn said. I have no time for false comforts, Lord Tyrion. She forced herself to stand and go to one of the windows, as well the southern-facing one. She watched the skies for the dragon, wishing that she felt as amazed and terrified as everyone else. But she felt numb. This was all beginning to seem quite hopeless, especially since Daenerys Targaryen's dragons were nowhere in sight. Through the window she saw shadows moving toward the southern wall. Lord Tywin seemed to notice them as well. Whites from the south. It seems we were wise to keep the wall guarded. It seems so, Catelyn murmured, a knot formed in her stomach. If the whites from the south were rushing the southern wall just as the dragon had arrived, then that meant... The blue fire struck like a bolt of lightning. One moment the skies were dark and the next, the dragon dived into view, spraying the top of the southern wall of Harrenhal with blue fire. The blast destroyed the defences at the top and crumbled the stone. If it was allowed to continue its assault, Catelyn was sure that it would rip a hole through the stone to allow the whites inside. The walls of Harrenhal were thick, but even they could not stand against constant dragon fire. But the dragon was not allowed to continue its assault uninterrupted. The siege weapons in the other towers turned on the creature, shooting scorpion bolts in its direction. The creature dove to the side to avoid them before fleeing back into the safety of the clouds. Below, Catelyn could hear the screams of dying men, and she tried not to think about how many had been killed in such a short time span. At least the burned will not rise again, she thought, and at least her children were not on the southern wall. Someone's children were, but Catelyn did not have the capacity to care for any of them. We'll need a lucky shot to have any hope, Randyll Tarly muttered. Striking a dragon with a scorpion bolt is no easy task. We need a dragon to fight it. Reinforcements will come, Tywin Lannister said. Yes, they will come, Tarly said. That's not the question. The question is, will the castle still be standing when they do? Catelyn heard the dragon cry out again, but this time it did not dive from the south. It dove from the east, knocking full force into the Tower of Ghost and ripping the scorpions from the stone. Then it turned and bathed the tower in blue fire. Stones crumbled and fell to the ground below, crushing some unfortunate soldiers running beneath. The other lords ran to the eastern side of the tower to watch as the scorpions from the other towers rallied to try to hit the dragon, but the creature was simply too fast. Catelyn lingered at the back because she could not stand to look. She heard another tower crumble and fall, and she felt it shake the earth. She wondered which it was. Beside her, Tyrion took another drink from his flask, but cursed when he found it empty. Damn, he muttered, now of all times. You should have paced yourself, Catelyn observed. Her voice sounded distant to her own ears, as if she herself was not fully attached to her body. "Yes, my lady," Tyrion forced a smile. "I suppose I should have." Some of the commanders rushed for the stairs, hurrying down before anyone could stop them. If the dragon was attacking the towers, it might come for this one next, or it might only take the towers that tried to kill it. Catelyn was not sure how much sense the creature had. Tywin crossed away from the group back to his brother Kevan. "We should go lower. It's attacking the tops of the towers, not the base. We don't want to tempt fate by being too far up." "Some have already fled with that in mind," Kevan said. "We'll lose our vantage point, but that seems to be the least of our concerns." Catelyn was aware of the conversation, but she was also watching out the window, searching for the dragon. It had disappeared for a long moment and she could not hear it. She took a step forward toward the window. Where could it? Blue fire met her question, and the dragon dipped from the clouds, smashing full force into the widow's tower, sending huge chunks of stone spinning toward the king's pyre. One moment, Catelyn was looking out over a group of experienced commanders, watching the battle from the window. The next moment, the debris from the widow's tower carved them all away. Those that were not killed by the rocks fell as the floor crumbled beneath them. The ground nearly gave way beneath Catelyn as well, but a firm hand on her arm had jerked her back from the ledge. It took her a moment to register the hand as belonging to Tywin Lannister. "Fuck," Tyrion cursed from behind her. "Fuck." That did not begin to summarize the situation, but Catelyn did not know any words that could. So many people had just died in front of them, and she had very nearly joined them. The breath left her all at once as she registered that fact. Then she stepped a few more feet away from the ledge, giving Tywin a single nod of thanks. He returned the wordless gesture, looking nearly as shaken as she was. "We need to get lower, Tywin," Kevan said. "Now." "Even if we go lower, the tower is going to collapse in on itself if the dragon attacks again," Tyrion said. "Either we fall to our deaths or we're crushed to death." "Choose wisely then," Tywin said. "We go lower, the base of the towers are strong, it will stand." "We might not have the chance," Catelyn murmured. She had been watching the dragon as they spoke. It had landed atop the ruins of the widow's tower and was peering across the now crumbled bridge at the opened face of the king's pyre. She could see a man sitting on its back, his skin pale white and his eyes glowing blue. This was the Night King everyone spoke of, and he was staring right at them. It was like a taunt of sorts. They had just tried to shoot the dragon from the sky, but the dragon remained intact, and their siege weapons were in pieces. "What do you mean to do now?" the Night King seemed to ask. "How long will you keep fighting?" The undead dragon's jaw unhinged, and it wobbled slightly on its perch. Catelyn stayed absolutely still watching it, knowing there was no way to dodge the blast. She dug her nails into her palms and steeled herself to die. But just then a shadow dove from the clouds, colliding with the white dragon and toppling it from its perch. The black beast, Drogon, landed atop the ruins of the tower, letting out a great roar and spitting yellow fire into the air. Daenerys Targaryen had arrived, and she knew the other reinforcements must be close behind. The Northmen, the men of the Riverlands. Catelyn had never thought she would feel so relieved to see a creature such as this. The white dragon swerved away from its new opponent, disappearing once again into the clouds. Catelyn let out a breath. "Thank the gods," Tyrion muttered. "You can thank them when we've won." Tywin opened the door to the stairwell. "Hurry." No one offered any protest. Kevan and Tyrion ducked through the door, and Catelyn hurried after them to make her way down the crumbling staircase. For a moment, it had seemed as if the battle was truly a lost cause, but the arrival of living dragons had given them just enough hope to keep going. The situation at the walls was growing dangerous as the whites continued to pile on top of each other in hopes of reaching the top. At first it seemed like an impossible task, but with so many disposable soldiers, several were beginning to make progress. The defenders at the walls fired arrows down into the masses of whites, taking out the uppermost creatures. In addition, the smiths had hauled great pots of melted dragon glass to the top and poured them down on the forces below. It was an effective attack, killing hundreds of the enemy at once. Gendry was among the smiths on the wall, and Arya kept casting him worried glances as he rained molten obsidian down on the dead. She did not want him to die here like Thomas. She did not want to lose any more familiar faces. And yet it only barely made a dent. With more dead coming from the north, it felt as if every white they killed had been replaced, and the soldiers were growing more and more tired as time wore on. The entire castle seemed to shake as the white dragon crashed into one of the towers. Debris flew from the top, scattering on the ground just behind the northern wall, crushing the soldiers in its path. Arya felt her heart leap into her throat at the sight. It wasn't the king's pyre tower, but the dragon might attack there next. Arya pushed the thought away, turning to take a swipe at a wight who had nearly made it over the wall. She cut him near in half with her sword and he fell. Her arm was beginning to feel heavy from fighting, but she ignored the pain. There was no time for that. They had to hold out for as long as they could. They had to give the reinforcements a chance. Another great crash rattled the castle, then another shortly after. Arya risked a look back to the sky, her heart hammering in her chest as she saw the white dragon perched on the top of one of its ruined towers. It was facing the cracked remains of the king's pyre tower, which had been partially destroyed by flying debris. The sight nearly choked Arya. Gods, please no. Were the people inside were already dead? Tyrion, Tywin, her mother, were they all gone just like that? The very thought was poison to her. No, surely they had escaped. They had to have escaped. Another screech echoed from overhead, but not from the white. It was a living dragon that plunged from the clouds then, crashing into the white dragon and knocking it from its perch. Arya let out a breath. Drogon, and that meant, they're here, the reinforcements are here. She whipped around to see the green dragon cutting a path of fire through the northern force of whites. Behind him rode the cavalry reinforcements from the twins, and they cut through the flank of the whites like a knife through butter. Arya could not see Robb, but she desperately hoped that he was among them. Still, she knew that the reinforcements would only have the upper hand for a short time. As soon as the whites recovered from the surprise attack, they would swarm them and they had nowhere to take cover. We have to let them inside the castle, Arya said. Not a chance, my lady, Beric said. The moment we do, the dead will enter. Yes, but if we leave them out there, they'll all join the army of the dead, Arya said. We need reinforcements in here at the walls. They came to help. We need to make them some kind of opening. It was as if the green dragon heard her plea. It dropped from the sky, landing in front of the gate, and blasted the closest whites with a line of fire, forcing them back. With a sweep of its tail, it knocked down the whites on the wall, scattering them across the snow. He had effectively knocked the enemy away from the gate, and on his back. Arya blinked. There was someone on his back, dressed all in black. Even from this high up she recognized him. Jon was riding a dragon. Open the gate, Jon cried out. Open it now. Arya looked up to see the reinforcements charging through a path created by Regal toward the doors. They were coming. There's our opening, Sir Beric, she said. Open the gate. The gate creaked open, and the reinforcements swarmed into the keep. Arya drew another arrow to shoot any whites that made it through the gaps, and the green dragon kept blasting fire on either side of the retreating cavalry, keeping back the undead. It was quite a sight to see Jon sitting atop a dragon, and Arya hoped that Daenerys had not seen him as well. Hopefully fighting the Night King had kept her preoccupied. The last of the reinforcements entered the northern gate, and it closed with a heavy thud. Some whites had broken past Regal's barrier, and they were quickly dealt with by the soldiers inside. Arya leaned down over the wall, calling down to her brother, "They're in, get out of there." Arya didn't know if he could even hear her, but moments later, Regal launched himself into the air, shaking off a few whites from his wings and flying away, spitting fire down on the whites as he went. Arya looked after the dragon in amazement and relief. At least Jon was okay for now. He was the only one she was sure was still alive. Thank the gods for dragons. Merwin appeared at Arya's side, gasping for breath. This time even Arya was willing to thank the gods for such a miracle. What's your report? The defences at the western wall are starting to crack, Merwin said, arriving at Arya's side. They're keeping them back for now, but... Send some of the reinforcements there then, Arya said. We could use some backup here as well. Her brow furrowed. Wait, the western wall, where's Jaime? He left command with someone else, Merwin said, and went to the Godswood to defend Bran. Arya's blood ran cold. If Jaime was in the Godswood with Bran, well, that was quickly going to become the Night King's target. Perhaps Bran had seen that and had asked for reinforcements there. A dragon screeched overhead, and Arya looked up to see the white dragon swooping over the Godswood, pursued by Daenerys on Drogon. But as it passed, several shapes dropped off of its back and into the trees. Whites, and maybe white walkers. They could survive a fall like that. Arya swallowed hard and turned to Merwin. I need you to take over command here. What? Merwin asked. The Godswood is about to need more reinforcements. If Bran dies, this is all for nothing. Arya hurried toward Beric, who was cutting down a few whites that had almost climbed high enough to grasp the edge of the wall. Beric, I need you and the rest of the Brotherhood to come with me. And where are we going, my lady? Beric asked. Arya leaned over the wall, stabbing her sword into the skull of a white. It toppled and took several of its brethren with it, the godswood to defend Bran. You think his current protection isn't enough? Beric asked. Soon none of our protection will be enough, Arya said, and when it crumbles he needs as many people around him as possible. I suppose you're right, Beric said. We're with you, Lady Arya. She nodded once, turning her sword in hand. Merwin was already giving orders for soldiers to fill in the gaps, directing a few Riverlands reinforcements up to the wall. And Arya hurried down the steps, the Brotherhood in tow, running for the godswood. It was possible that her mother and Tywin had been killed in the fall of King's Pyre Tower. She did not yet know if Robb had survived to come south. Jon was on a dragon, and perhaps the safest of any of them at the moment. The only two people left that Arya was sure she could protect were Jaime and Bran. And if she was going to die, she would rather it be with them. Despite Tyrion's fears, the King's Pyre had not completely crumbled. The small group of survivors wound down the old staircase, stopping only occasionally to peer out the windows. It was hard to make any sense of the chaos from this angle, but Tywin could see that some of the reinforcements had made it inside the keep. Daenerys Targaryen's dragons were serving their purpose after all. They came to a larger room in the tower, dusty and empty from disuse. For a moment Tyrion paused, looking around. Is this far down enough to be safe? I don't think any place in this keep is safe, Catelyn Stark murmured, but it seems out of the dragon's line of attack. There are vaults beneath this tower, Kevan said, heading for the next door. They may be the safest place as more whites break through the defences. It will only delay the inevitable if the castle falls, Tywin said. It may, Kevan looked back at him, but if the living do lose, the Night King might miss a few surviving soldiers. So long as you're alive, there's a chance to mount another attack. Tywin appreciated his brother's faith in him, but he knew that if their armies fell here, they had little chance to mount another attack. With what army would they fight? Nearly all of them would be destroyed. Kevan started to open the door but paused, his brow furrowing as if he was listening for something. Tywin heard it too, something rattling behind the door and the sound of a snarl. Kevan, get back, Tywin said, taking a step forward, but the door burst open before Kevan could obey. Sending him stumbling away as the whites came through, there were 4 of them. No, 5, either way they were desperate to kill. Tywin drew his sword, cutting through one of the whites as it came at him. Another went for Catelyn Stark, shoving her up against a wall, but she drove her dagger through its eye before it could do any real damage. Kevan was fighting another white up against the wall as well. They would have to get the door closed before any others found their way up. They had no way of knowing how many whites were already in the keep. Were these ones that had slipped past the defences of the walls, or were they their own dead soldiers, risen from the grave? Either of those options was preferable to the idea of the wall falling. Something caught Tywin's ankle, and he fell backward onto the ground and found himself staring into the eyes of a white. Its crooked jaw unhinged and let out a terrible cry, raising a rusted dagger. It never got a chance to use it. A dragon glass axe stuck in its back and it crumbled, the blue light leaving its gaze at once. Tyrion stood just behind it, wild-eyed and panting for breath, and Tywin stared right back, unable to hide his shock. Come on, Tyrion said, extending his hand. That won't be the last of them. Tywin let out a breath and accepted his son's hand, getting back to his feet. From the stairwell, Tywin could hear more coming. He glanced at Tyrion and they both moved forward at the same moment toward the door. A white burst through on its hands and knees, letting out a chilling cry. Tyrion put an axe through its skull and it fell silent. Cursing, Tyrion tore his axe from the head of the white and kicked it down the stairs. As soon as the doorway was clear, Tywin slammed it shut, locking it tightly. We'll barricade it, Tywin said. Right, Tyrion said, grabbing a chair off in the corner and setting it against the door. Tywin glanced to the side to see Catelyn Stark still trying to catch her breath. She looked unharmed though shaken. Lady Stark, were you hurt at all? I'm fine, Catelyn said, returning her dragon glass dagger to the pouch on her belt. I can help. Tywin nodded once. It was best if Catelyn Stark survived the battle. He had no intention of explaining her death to her daughter. Kevan, bring whatever you can find, Tywin said. Those crates in the back should do. His brother did not respond immediately, and when he did, his voice was hoarse. I don't think I can lift much. Tywin turned to see Kevan slightly slumped against the wall. His armor was stained with blood, as was the ground at his feet. The hilt of a rusted blade protruded from the gap under his arm, and there was blood trailing down the corner of his mouth. 7 hells, Tyrion muttered from behind him. Tywin did not speak at all. He simply stared straight ahead at his brother as cruel reality slowly set in around him. Kevan coughed and began to pitch to the side, but Tywin hurried forward, catching him before he could topple and easing him to the ground. Sit down, don't move. It's not so bad, Kevan muttered. Sweat had broken out across his forehead and he was deathly pale. Tywin wondered if he was intentionally lying or if he simply had not registered the severity of his wound. At this angle, Tywin knew the blade must have pierced his lung. I'll be all right. Don't speak, Tywin said. You need to stay still or you'll make it worse. I just need to rest for a moment, Kevan murmured. Then I can help. I said don't speak, you fool, Tywin snapped. Anger was the only thing he had to shield him from the rising pain. He knew his brother was dying, slowly drowning in his own blood. This wasn't supposed to happen. Between the two of them, Tywin was the one who was supposed to die first. Sorry, Kevan murmured. I'm sorry I went ahead. I've always followed you, but I went ahead I shouldn't have. Tywin's jaw clenched and his grasp tightened on Kevan's arm, as if a tighter grip would keep his brother there. Kevan had been following him since they were children. Since Kevan could barely walk, he had stumbled after Tywin. And all of these years he had never stopped. He had become like Tywin's shadow, and people were not meant to lose their shadows. He wanted to reprimand Kevan for going ahead of him to the door. If he had stayed back, perhaps this wouldn't have happened, but his reprimands meant nothing and he did not have the energy. You don't need to follow right now, just rest, Kevan. Kevan nodded once. He coughed again and blood sprayed from his mouth. His eyes were beginning to glaze over, staring into space. Part of Tywin wanted to shake him to keep him from fadding, as if that would help, as if any man's anger or grief could put a stop to death. Tywin had learned long ago that death could not be reasoned with. Our brothers are here, Kevan whispered, reaching out a hand. So is father and mother. They found their way back. Do you see them? Of course Tywin did not see them, but he had walked along the edge of death before, and he knew the kind of tricks the delirious mind played. He could not say as much, though. He did not have any words. Instead, by way of answer, he grasped his brother's hand tight in his own. Kevan tried to say something else, but his voice was too soft for Tywin to hear, too soft and too hoarse, and before Tywin could ask him to speak again, he felt Kevan's hand go limp in his. His brother's eyes stared into some far-off place, never to focus again. Slowly, Tywin detached his hand and stood, taking a few steps back. Only then did he remember the other presences in the room. Catelyn, Stark and Tyrion stood off to one wall, watching him carefully, like one might watch a lion with a wounded paw. He was angry that they had been there to see Kevan die, though there was nowhere else they could have gone. You should be barring the door, Tywin said coldly, unless you'd like the dead to kill us as well. Neither of them replied, not even Tyrion, who so often had some snide reply. Instead, he immediately turned to the task of finding more to brace the door. Lady Catelyn, however, was not so eager to resume the work. The expression on her face was one that Tywin hated. Pity. Was there any worse look in this world? Lannisters had no need for pity. Did you not hear me? Tywin asked flatly. I heard you, Catelyn murmured. I was concerned about if the Night King raises the dead inside the walls. Tywin glanced down at Kevan's body and turned away just as quickly. He could not look at him. I have a dragon glass blade. If it becomes an issue, I will handle it. It was more logical to pitch his body out the window and into the darkness, but Tywin could not bring himself to consider the possibility. It was foolish. He was already gone. It did not matter if his body was here or elsewhere. Kevan was gone. Catelyn nodded once. As you say, Lord Tywin. Then at last she turned away from him and set about helping Tyrion with the door. Away from her scrutiny, Tywin felt as if he could breathe again, though not without effort. He was furious with himself for acting this way at all. This was war. He was prepared for death in war. He had seen so many battles after all. There were always casualties. And yet... Tywin exhaled, rubbing a hand over his face. And yet... Standing in the godswood was maddening because Jaime could not see what was happening on the walls of Harrenhal. Had they been overwhelmed? Had one of the gates fallen, or had they held strong? Had the reinforcements come from the twins? Had any of the dragons been slain? Bran did not seem keen to answer as his eyes had rolled back into his head again. So Jaime was left to wonder, staring into the darkness, waiting for the first enemies to appear. Despite the distant sounds of battle, the woods was eerily quiet. Not one of Bran's guards, from the Brotherhood to the Lannister soldiers to Bran's own personal house guard, made a sound. Neither did the Reed girl, crouched next to his wheelchair, turning her spear in her hand. She had a focused expression, like that of a hunter fixed on its prey. Despite the fact that she was the prey in this scenario, that expression reminded him a bit of Arya. Arya, it was maddening not knowing what was happening with her as well. Jaime knew well enough the dangers of battle. No matter how skilled a fighter, they could be killed at any moment, often on accident. In the chaos, only the lucky survived, but the idea of her falling on the walls was unbearable to him, not after everything they had been through. There was a great crash then which startled Jaime from his thoughts as it rattled the godswood. He looked up to see the top of one of the towers disappearing from sight, ripped apart by the dragon. Jaime could not tell if it was King's Pyre or not, but he desperately hoped that it wasn't. He was not eager to lose the last of his family in one night. They will be fine, he told himself. Father, Tyrion, Uncle Kevin, Arya, all of them will be fine. Several moments later, Bran's eyes snapped back into place and he looked around at the men who surrounded him. Draw your swords, the fight is about to come to us. Has the wall fallen? Mira asked. No, not yet, Bran said. Watch the sky. Jaime did not understand what he meant at first, before the white dragon swooped low over the godswood. He ducked, cursing under his breath, preparing for the beast to rain blue fire down on top of them. But it did not stop. Drogon, the black dragon, was in pursuit. At least the reinforcements came, Jaime thought. Thank the gods for that. However, as the white dragon passed overhead, pieces seemed to fall away from the creature and plummet to the ground. No, not pieces, whites. They hit the ground all around the godswood with a dull thud, lying motionless for a long moment. Then, slowly, they rose, heedless of any broken bones. Guard Bran Stark, Mira cried out. Don't let them near. The men in the godswood formed a wide ring around Bran and the weirwood tree, just in time to intercept the first of whites. They were vicious, desperate creatures with no regard for their own safety. They stabbed at blindly in hopes to hit their target, and it was an effective strategy. None of them had any skill, but a wild man's knife could do as much damage as a skilled man's sword. But through the darkness, Jaime could see that it was not just mindless whites that had plummeted into the garden. As their lines began to break and scatter, 2 white walkers strode forward, swords in hand, heading straight for Bran. Mira Reed was guarding Bran's flank, fending off quite a few whites on her own. It left Bran's front opened. 7 hells, Jaime thought, stepping in their path and raising his sword. The white walkers paused for just a moment, glancing at each other. Then one began to circle to the left while the other continued its advance. First at a slow, steady pace, then a sprint. It moved inhumanly fast, and Jaime only barely raised his sword in time to block its strike. The blades rang as they clashed, and the white walker's lip curled in annoyance. Its hand flashed to its hip, drawing a dagger, and Jaime threw himself to the side in time to avoid taking the blade to his heart. He whipped around as the white walker advanced on him and rose in the next second, driving his sword through its heart. It crumbled along with several of the whites, but not all of them. Jaime looked for the other white walker. As it went left, one of the Brotherhood had engaged it to keep it back, but when the creature saw its brother shatter, it turned on Jaime, cutting the head clean off its opponent as it did. Jaime swallowed hard as it advanced, his grip tightening on his sword. The creature swung at him in a wide arc, and Jaime was forced to back away to avoid the blow. They could feel the cold coming off the weapon, and it rattled him to his soul. Jaime found himself up against the trunk of a tree with the white walker bearing down on him. He raised his sword to block and managed it narrowly, but the force of the blow rattled his jaw and made his arm feel numb. The white walker was stronger than him, and he had the better ground. I'm going to die, he thought. I'm going to die here. But even as he thought it, a flash of metal glinted over the white walker's shoulder. Moments later, a sword cleaved through the creature's shoulder, and it shattered in the wake of the blade. And suddenly there was Arya, standing over him, gripping Winter's Fury in both hands. She looked half a wolf in that moment, with her face twisted into a snarl, and Jaime had never been so relieved to see anyone in his life. Arya grabbed his wrist and hauled him to his feet. As she did, Jaime lunged past her, stabbing another approaching wight through the head. They stood back to back in front of Bran, twin swords in hand, cutting down every wight that came near. At some point, the woods grew quiet again, and only the living remained standing. Mira Reed let out a relieved breath, gripping onto Bran's chair. Thoros of Ma laughed, turning his flaming sword in hand. And slowly, Jaime turned back to look at Arya, checking to make sure she was all right. She looked up at him in the same instant, her eyes wide. "Are you hurt?" "No, tired but not hurt," Jaime said. "You?" Arya nodded once. "The same." She shook her head. Why did you come here? You were meant to be on the western wall." "I was, but your brother requested that I come to defend him after the second trench fell," Jaime said. "I thought it best not to argue." "I'm glad you didn't argue," Bran said. "Now you're all here, exactly where you're supposed to be." Arya turned and went to her brother. "Bran, are you all right?" "For now," Bran said. "The castle will be overwhelmed soon. We will have to lead some of the dead away." "We'll never make it out of the castle," Arya said. "They've surrounded it on all sides now. The most open path is the south, but there's no gate." "No obvious gate anyway," Bran said. "Don't worry, they're almost here." "Who?" Jaime asked. Gods above, this boy spoke in riddles, and in the midst of a war for their lives, it was not appreciated. "The children," Bran said. Then something strange happened. The weirwood tree just behind Bran began to move. Its roots shifted in their soil, cracking the ground and creating a large gap in the earth. If Jaime was not mistaken, he could almost swear that the hateful face carved into the wood had twisted even further. When the tree ceased to move again, there was a large hole in the earth, large enough for any man to fit through. And in that hole crouched a child, at least. Jaime thought it must be a child. It was too small to be anything else. But its skin was a strange shade of green and its hair like leaves. It had small, sharp features except for its eyes. They were cat-like, with slit pupils, and they glowed green in the darkness. "Brandon Stark," the child said. "It's time to go." Bran nodded and turned to Jaime and Arya. "Sir Jaime, I will need you to carry me. My chair will not fit into the tunnel." "The tunnel?" Jaime asked. "Where does the tunnel lead?" "Outside of the keep," Bran said, "and to the shores of the God's Eye." "And why are we going there?" Arya asked. "There's no cover out there. The dead will be on us in a minute." "They won't," Mira said, turning her spear in hand. "Because we're not going to wait on the shores. We're going to cross the waters." "That's right," Bran said. "It's time we saw the Isle of Faces."